Hey, what's up everyone? Friday morning, Elohel Esports and Bench bringing you another Things I Like, Things I Don't. This week I'm discussing Taimou's recent comments and the community's reaction toward Aero. Then I'll share my thoughts on the Mayhem's plan and one team who's been doing it infinitely better. Let's go. Three days ago, Dallas Fuel DPS player Taimou tweeted out, "There is nothing more depressing than not being given a chance to do what you're supposed to be doing." A thinly veiled reference to his lack of playtime this season with the Dallas Fuel. And with the Fuel struggling at the moment, I understand his frustration. Believing that you are your team's best option is part of being a pro. In fact, I'd be more concerned if a player didn't think that they were capable of being slotted in and contributing at this point. Taimou since deleted the tweet, which is probably for the best. I won't even address whether he should have tweeted it in the first place. I do, however, believe that the negative community response to the role Aero played here is just a little bit unfair. The Fuel are currently 10-8 overall with a -2 map score. That's good for 9th place overall and puts them right in the middle of the post-Stage 4 play-in tournament. But Dallas is far from a lock at the moment. The Fuel had one of the easier first-half schedules, and their 1-3 record this stage reflects how they have fared against some of the stronger teams this season. Not to mention, Dallas still have Spark, Hunters, and the NYXL left in Stage 3. And their Stage 4 schedule is daunting to say the least, with matches against the Spitfire, Gladiators, Shock, and Spark. They'll also square off against the Reign and Valiant, two teams who can't be underestimated right now. When you look at it that way, things are pretty grim for the Fuel. So what do you do if you're Dallas? It sounds like Taimou's been putting in some time on Brig, so do you try and make that swap with Zach? Are you, the fans, entirely, 100%, without a shadow of a doubt certain that Zach is the issue with Dallas? I think there's an easy tie-in here, where one can assume that Aero's previous relationship with Zach on Fusion University is directly responsible for Zach's playtime, and that feels like a very unfair assumption to make without insight into the Dallas team. You'll recall that many were unhappy with Aero being selected over Deepay as the World Cup coach, and it feels like that sentiment might also be pouring over into the conversation that followed Taimou's tweet. I think we are far too quick to make assumptions that teams who perform well must always have good coaching staffs, and vice versa. There's more nuance to it than that, and while I'm not here telling you that Deepay shouldn't have been the top choice, I think it's unfair, and often inaccurate, to play to the result and always assume good teams must have good coaches, and of course, that bad teams must have bad ones. It doesn't work like that, and past Overwatch League results are proof that this relationship is not always true. To be clear, this is more of a response to the hypothetical approach to this conversation. And I'm not trying to color your opinion on who you think should have been selected as coach of the USA. I know it's both fun and necessary to discuss who we think would have been the best option. And I don't want to take that away from the community. Hell, I didn't want either of these fools. I picked Harsha. What I'm saying though is that it's important to consider these things on the proper merits, especially when you're going to be overly critical of someone like Aero in public without being able to justify it any more than, "I thought Deepay would be a better option and Dallas has been losing a lot recently, so Aero must not be a good coach." That isn't how it works. Back to the Taimou matter though, without any insight into his current form, it's very difficult to say one way or another how the Fuel should approach this. If the season were lost and Dallas had nothing to play for, I think you can bring in other arguments about committing to Zachary because he's younger and you potentially see him as having a higher ceiling than Taimou over the rest of his career. But the Fuel need to collect themselves right now. They need to figure out a plan of attack ASAP because they're very much still in the mixer for play-ins here. Maybe the tweet wasn't an ideal look for PR, but I do appreciate Taimou's frustration. If he still has anything left in the tank, and he seems to think he does, I don't know if bringing him in would be a bad thing. Looking back on Dallas' Stage 4 run in Season 1, Taimou was motivated and committed. That was made very obvious from his expressions on stage and behind the scenes in the video of his live reaction to Fuel sneaking into the stage playoffs. Of course, there could be more to this situation than we're aware of, or maybe Taimou's opinion of his level of play is completely different than what the coaches are seeing from him right now in practice. But if there's any chance he can offer some value to the Fuel at this point, it would be an incredible storyline to see him light a fire underneath this squad one more time and help them make a push for the play-in tournament. It's rare that we see a highly skilled Korean player move from NA contenders back to Korea. But that's the case now that RunAway announced the signing of DPS player Yaki. Yaki of course spent last season with XL2, but likely decided that Korea would be a better option than having to play remotely with ping issues to NA. Who or You made a similar move at one time, when he was loaned out from Fusion University to Meta Athena. and despite having far more accomplishments and greater peaks than Yaki, the former's return to Korea was very underwhelming. In fact, Yaki and Who Are You couldn't be more different. Who Are You's hero pool really caps out at Genji and Doomfist, whereas Yaki has proven to be capable of playing many DPS heroes to a high level, including both hitscan and projectile, and so he's somewhat similar to Glister in that way. Yaki also plays Zarya and D.Va, and so he can give any roster a lot of options. Yaki will provide a highly versatile DPS option for RunAway, and his value will only grow once we shift or are forced out of the current meta. Last night, Monty tweeted in support of Mayhem's new rebuild, saying, "People really jumped the gun on judging Mayhem even when they directly stated that they were continuing to add players. I'm excited to see what happens to the Mayhem once all their new players and coaches have time to gel." In a response to Yiska, writer and host of the TC podcast, Monty mentioned that, well, they can only work with what is available right now. Okay, so I'm not disagreeing with Monty. I'm more so using his tweets as a jumping off point to get at a different issue. Yes, this iteration of the Mayhem lineup will undoubtedly be the best that they've had, but could it have been better? 1,000,000 times, yes. When Monty mentions that they can only work with what they have available now in reference to the budget, that is true. Yes, Barehands was likely capped to a degree when trying to target players these past few months. But the org deserves extra criticism here for how flippantly it spent money in the offseason when building Mayhem 2.0 for 2019. It doesn't seem like Mayhem ever had one primary decision maker over that time, and so there was no singular vision as to how the team would be constructed. With multiple individuals there in a position where they had influence over the roster signings and no voice of dissension to contest the decisions, the team operated like the Wild West. The team opted into Tavik's second-year option despite it clearly not being a good match for the team or player. They bumped up Apply and added McGravy as well, and as we all know, the team made a complete 180 soon thereafter and decided they didn't want a mixed roster anymore. Don't forget that OWL player contracts are guaranteed too, so cutting Tavik and Apply mid-season doesn't exactly save them money. Had Mayhem been on the same page during the signing window last summer and put more thought into their management and decision-making structure, maybe we wouldn't be here. Instead of blowing their budget on what amounts to essentially 2.5 different rosters just halfway through the 2019 season, imagine if all of that money was spread out across just one roster from the off-season. The ones making roster and other pertinent decisions within Mayhem at the management level these past few months, Matt, Barehands, criticism is warranted and I haven't shied away from it. But the biggest problem in Florida is, in my opinion, the lack of oversight and attention paid to the team by the org above. It was ultimately their responsibility to set up and structure this team's hierarchy, and I don't think they did any of the aforementioned any favors when it comes to putting them in a position to succeed. The term apathy certainly comes to mind here, and at least on the competitive side of the org, I really do question their dedication to the Mayhem. On the complete opposite side of the spectrum is the Shanghai Dragons, who, after going 0-40 in the inaugural season of Overwatch League, have thrown fat stacks in every which direction to recover. And recover they have. So much so that the Dragons, with not a win to their name last year, have already won more matches in 2019 than the previously mentioned Mayhem have across their entire existence. Just think about how much money they must have shelled out for this team. Buyout prices for top Korean players and teams this last offseason was reportedly not cheap. And with Kongdu Panthera coming off a runner-up finish in Season 2 of Contenders Korea in 2018, it's a good bet that Luffy, Koma, Ding, and Youngjin didn't come cheap. Add in Diem from Lucky Future Zenith, and Gamsu coming from the Boston Uprising, well, let's just say that you can't go to Boston and shop bargain bins in this league. They also just added Envy from the Toronto Defiant, and who knows, maybe they aren't even done yet. After that debacle that was 2018 for Shanghai, it says a lot about the commitment of the owners to throw this much money at the team to improve, both before and during the season. Maybe Jane kills me for directing viewers away from his channel, and maybe not, but I did want to give a quick shout to two pieces of content I really enjoyed this week. The first was a VOD review of Justice main tank Janice from Chronodota, who has been focusing on streaming and doing main tank reviews and analysis, but previously played for the Sydney Drop Bears in Contenders Australia, where he won the 2018 Season 3 championship. I've been checking out his reviews for a while, but this one was really nice because it made great use of the new replay viewer. He also does a really good job of balancing his criticism here. Chrono's approach to assigning blame is very measured, in that he identifies the how and why Washington lost teamfights in their recent match with the Gladiators, but he reserves judgment of individuals in situations where team comms are needed to know definitively which callouts were made and whether a player could have been reacting to them. The second piece of content was a video from the Score Esports. To be completely honest, I've never very much liked the work coming out of this outlet, and I know that there's been some claims that they've allegedly piggybacked on the work of others without giving proper credit. And so I haven't really checked them out in a while, but was pleasantly surprised when a 20-minute featured documentary they did on the current Vancouver Titans roster going back to their RunAway days hit Reddit 2 days ago. The narrative arc of the video is well crafted and hits all the right beats. The video editing was terrific, and they must have put in a lot of time and effort digging through old Runner and Flower Vin VODs to get some of the content together. For example, there's a segment in there detailing the team's near collapse prior to Apex Season 4, and it shows Runner, Flower, and the players moving into the desolate new apartment that would later become their team house, and the work they did to renovate and spruce the place up. Whether you know the backstory of this team or not, I highly recommend giving this a look. That does it for this week's Tilted. Thanks for checking it out. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button and subscribe to Eloho Esports YouTube channel while you're at it. You can find and follow me on Twitter at BenchMobDC.